Good morning. This may seem like an odd place to start in a AutoCAD or actually any drafting class, but in other words, not in the specific software you're going to be using. But I want to go through some of the commonalities to the other softwares that you've been using or will use that you want to keep in mind as you're developing a set of habits within AutoCAD. Software shifts. Interfaces shift, but we have come over the last 10 years to some common place with a lot of the selection tools and a lot of the context driven menus you're going to see. So I'm going to start this discussion with talking about when you're kitting out, when you're buying potentially a computer, or probably not that, maybe just a human interface device. iPod Touch is a human interface device. It's a lot more than that, but that screen is a certain way to deal with things. And the mouse, which may go the way of the dinosaur eventually, but it seems to be hanging in there pretty well. And I'm going to talk about, if you go out and buy a mouse, seriously consider getting a 5-button mouse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-button mouse. We don't have those here in class, but we'll talk about, I'll bring them in and demonstrate how much more power it gives you in terms of not having to go to the keyboard. Okay, so what I want to show here is I'm going to start with this. I'm doing 10 minutes a day on the Geometer Sketchpad, which more or less is a tool that takes you from geometry to mathematics and then eventually to drafting. So I'm just going to more or less turn this on. I'm left clicking and I'm turning on the grid. And in this program, I'm going to left click and I'm holding over that, and you see me pulling it out this way or this way to give it a big field there. It's actually defining something called the Cartesian coordinate system. Though I will point out here, if you notice that the scale left and right and up and down, your eye doesn't pick out that it's actually a square, that this is actually a true scale, but it actually is. You see that these squares are basically are true. Now, if that's not on your screen, you should be very aware of always setting up your screen if you can so it reads true scale both in the left and right and the up and down, and eventually in the in and out or the Z direction. All right, that said, I'm just going to go ahead and left clicking and drawing, left clicking and drawing, left clicking and drawing, holding down. I'm holding down, and this is what you call more or less a flyout. So I'm going to hold down and I'm going to go click, 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 click. And then on this program I go to the end to finish it. Now, if you notice the interface here, this stuff here is highlighted in this program, and different programs are going to highlight differently. But generally, if I click out offside, either escape, right click, or go typically to a selection tool and just grab nothing, it clears the selection. All right, so this concept of how we make selections is what we're talking about. I'm going to make selections and make potential moves. So one way to make selections is to left click on something. So I'm going to left click, and you notice it's adding things. In this case, left click, it's adding to the selection set. What I'm going to go back here is I'm going to left click on there, and that's clearing the palette here. Another way is to actually drag across. And if you notice here, I'm dragging across. It's everything that I'm in fact touching. And in this case, if I start another drag, if you notice, it loses the last drag. It loses the selection set. However, if I hold a shift key when I do it, in this program it doesn't work. But very often in other programs we're going to see that it will. So this idea of selecting and then highlighting is what I want to point out. And finally, I'm selecting, and now I'm right clicking out here. And the right click you're going to see is extremely important. The shift right click, the control left right click. And if you think about it, that's why having a 5-button mouse on your is important, or a nice thing to kind of get a hold of early, because that way you have 5 buttons on the mouse, and then when you hold the shift key you essentially have 5 more, and when you hold the control key you have 5 more, and when you hold the alt key you have 5 more. So you have 20 commands on your mouse, and you can go even wilder than that. But that sense of being able to use the mouse to do a lot more than just grabbing stuff is something that you want to be aware of. So one last time I'm going to come across here. Now I'm going to go over the top of one of these and right click. And you notice here it's not changing a lot, but what you're going to start to notice in different programs is as you grab things and select, and these are called selecting. They're not all going to act the same, but they tend to act about the same. So I'm holding the shift key now, and you're going to have to realize it's going to be which way you drag. In this program, you can see the color is the same, so it's probably acting the same both ways. In many programs, if you go left to right, you get one type of thing, and if you go right to left, you get another. Okay, so that said, this program is not so mature, even though it's around since 1962. We'll look at that. I'm going to now bring you into a program that you probably have access to, or you all will be having access to. I'm going to lay it like it is. Kids start doing PowerPoint in around 5th grade at my kid's school. So I'm just going to go in here. I brought up a PowerPoint, and I'm going to, at this point, I'm double clicking out here. I'm going to click on something, and now I'm over. When I leave it and I right click, I get something like that. But if I click it and leave my kind of cursor on top and right click, I can now do something else like cut. So I'm clicking on it, right click over the top of it and cut. So I just want to point out that we're going to be looking at context driven menus a lot in AutoCAD, and it becomes pretty natural if you've been in Windows a while, and if you haven't, you want to develop a natural set of habits in a couple of programs at once so you don't think of all these things in AutoCAD as specific. So what I'm going to do here in this program, I am going to insert, and I'm going to insert, and I don't know, I'll just bring in some shapes, right? So I'm going to bring in a rectangle with some rounded edges. Some of you may have worked in Visio. I've had students, Visio is called the poor man's CAD. So if you have, let me know that. If you've worked in some other vector programs, vector-based programs, and if you're like a Photoshop nut, and there's a lot of them out there, I really want to talk to you. You'll see that this is vector work. Things like Photoshop and Paint are raster work, and we'll talk about what that means. But what we're doing right now, I just want to show you again. Now you see if I go left to right, I get a blue. And if I go right to left, I get a blue. My assumption is it's going to act the same way. So I can grab this. In this case, since I'm not holding the shift key, I'm not adding. But if I hold the shift key, and actually I was wrong on that. They don't have my keyboard on. So it'll be the same mistake every morning. So in this program, I know how it works. And so I have to wait for the shift key to work. So I'm going to click this shift. You notice here I'm holding the shift key and adding to an additional selection set. If I do not hit this, if I click over the top of it again, okay, selecting and deselecting, I also have the ability to come across and grab some, and then shift and grab some more. And then once again, there's a difference between when I right click out here, I'm holding the shift key again, or when I right click over. Last thing I'm going to point out here, and I've got a video, there is actually, eventually these things work as individual things. You can explode them very often. In this case, it's not the command that you use, but you can take them down into pieces, or you can group them. AutoCAD uses a different command than that, but if I can take that and I can make a group, and this is one of my favorite things, now that group is going to act as a unit. Right, I'm left clicking and then holding my left mouse to do this. All right, I'm hitting escape bar. But realistically, you can also group or ungroup. Very often the command would be explode, and this is one of my favorite things of all in PowerPoint. Got to show it to you. I've now selected each of those three. It shows the grips, and it shows this kind of rotation point. This is one of my favorite things. So I'm left clicking and going over one of those because they're not grouped. They all turn in a particular direction. All right, so that's kind of look at a little bit of selection stuff in PowerPoint, and I'm going to finally, in the last minute, bring up a program called Sketchup, and these are all just to get you thinking about how we're going to think about our set of AutoCAD habits so that they transfer to things like PowerPoint. And I'm going to go around the class and see what other programs you use so we can see. But right now I'm just going to go Camera, Standard Views, Top, and I'm going to draft a couple things in this program. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to show you it's the same thing. Now when I grab a selection tool there, I come across, and you see that plus or minus, I can add and subtract. A lot of it has to do with how you use your mouth and other buttons. We'll take a look at this in class and then get going on AutoCAD as we learn how to move things before we actually start to draft things. Thanks for listening.